Due to the COVID pandemic and the ability of the virus to spread from person to person, the governor has implemented a number of executive orders directed at controlling the spread of the virus and minimizing face-to-face interactions. Public gatherings are strongly discouraged by the CDC, state of Utah, and local health departments, since they facilitate face-to-face contact and pose an elevated risk for virus transmission. The Division of Wildlife Resources and the chair of this public body have determined that public gathering at Regional Advisory Council and Wildlife Board meetings presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who attend, and will conduct this meeting using a fully electronic format. This meeting format is authorized by a recent amendment to the Utah Code and executive order by Utah Governor Gary Herbert, and will be temporarily used in place of the in-person public meetings that usually occur around the state. Anyone wishing to comment on agenda topics and future meetings or to observe this meeting may do so by logging into the division's webpage at wildlife.utah.gov/feedback.html, where instructions and links are provided. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad you were able to take time out of your schedules to be here. I've got a couple of emails from people that are not going to be able to make it tonight. I just got a text from Ben Lauder saying that he had an emergency and he's not going to make it, and Jake Still. But let's take a roll call and see who's here. AJ Maurer. Ben Lauder. Christine Schmitz.
Here.
Danny Potts.
Yeah, that's me. That looks like the telephone.
Eric Reed. Jake Steele. Josh Lenart.
Here.
Ken Strong. I know it's here. He tapped his phone earlier.
There we go.
There you go. Luke Decker.
Here.
Mike Christensen.
Here.
Scott Jensen.
Present.
Steve Lund. Excellent. It looks like we have a quorum, and so we'll proceed. I'd also like to welcome the DWR staff, specifically those that presented and are available tonight to answer questions in this meeting. In particular, Randy Oplinger, the Sport Fisheries Program Coordinator, Craig Walker, the Aquatics Section Assistant Chief, Jackie Watson, the Blue Ribbon Fisheries Biologist, and Lindy Varney, the Wildlife Licensing Coordinator. I'd also like to welcome all the public that are viewing tonight from at home or wherever you're at. You will not be able to comment tonight. However, the presentations were provided well in advance and you had the opportunity to comment, and you can do that in future meetings if you so choose. I'd like to call for a motion to approve the agenda and the past minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
And the past minutes?
And the
I'll
past
second
minutes.
it.
Who did the second?
Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, I'll call the roll. Chris Schmitz.
Yes.
Danny Potts.
Yep.
Josh Lenart.
Yes.
Ken Strong.
Yes.
Luke Decker.
Yes.
Mike Christensen.
Yes.
Scott Jensen.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Now it is my turn to give you a brief update of what happened at the last board meeting. So the last board meeting was on August 27th. There was an motion to approve the fur bear and bobcat harvest recommendations as presented by the division. That motion passed unanimously. There was a motion to extend the limited entry cougar seasons by 30 days on the Oker-Stansbury East, Wasatch Mountains West, and the Wasatch Mountains West Strawberry units, those two units. Oker Stansbury East, and Wasatch Mountains West. Extend it for 30 days to give limited entry people 30 more days before it opened up to harvest objective. That motion passed 5-1. There was a motion to accept the remainder of the Cougar recommendations as presented by the division. That motion was amended to include a better clarification of what, or definition of what a kitten was. And with that amendment, that motion passed unanimously. The next thing on the agenda was the sensitive species list in the state of Utah. And there was a motion to table the recommendations until October 1st Wildlife Board meeting and schedule an educational work session in the meantime so that the board could better understand the sensitive species list in the state of Utah. That motion passed unanimously. There was a motion to approve the expo permit audit as presented. That motion passed unanimously. There was a motion to approve the expo contract extension as presented. That motion passed unanimously. There was a motion to approve the expo permit list with the addition that all permits are available to both residents and non-residents for the length of the contract. That motion passed unanimously. There was a motion to ask the division to look at any new hunting technology since the last update to the board and report on it. And that was to be placed in the action log, and that passed unanimously. And there was a motion to approve the expo permit rule amendment as presented, and that passed unanimously. And that's what I have. Any questions about the Wildlife Board update? Okay, thank you. The next, I'll turn it over to Jason to provide a regional update.
Excuse me. All right. Thank you, Brock. I appreciate that. Just a few things to share with the RAC today. I'll start with our wildlife section. A little while back, our wildlife board requested that the division start looking at the buck to doe ratios and population objectives for herd management units throughout the state. And our biologists are starting in that process and putting together committees to review those in the region. And then also today was the opening of quite a few different hunts, including dusky and ruffed grouse, mourning dove, cottontail, snowshoes, ptarmigan, all kinds of upland game, and has started today. And of course, there's going to be a whole bunch of upland game hunts starting later this month as well. So good time to be out in the field. Temperatures are cooling off a little bit, so that's kind of nice. Maybe except for the mourning doves that don't like that so much, but hope you get an opportunity to get out and get some hunting in. For our administrative section, we wanted to thank the public. As many of you know, we have a mandate within our buildings to wear masks. So we've had quite a few people come in the office to conduct business, licenses, permits, whatever it might be. And we really appreciate the cooperation that the public has had as they've come in and into our office and had their masks on. Just a couple of quick things on some of the permits that will be going on sale. Maybe you've heard the fall general season turkey permits go on sale in 2 days on the 3rd. And they'll be online only through the 17th. And after the 17th, they'll be available from licensed agents on the 18th through February, the end of February. Bobcat tags also will only be available online beginning October 1st and continue online until the permits are sold out. From our aquatic section, they've been spending a lot of time, of course, out monitors, especially some of the fires impacted on the Spanish Fork drainage. They've seen some encouraging growth and survival of both cutthroat and brown trout in Diamond Fork specifically. And they're encouraged about the cutthroat growth and survival in the Nebo. They have been doing some habitat restoration work on the Nebo, and some of that work's showing some promise as well. And we're excited about moving forward and continued restoration on that entire drainage. The kokanee trap is up at Strawberry Reservoir, and there have been a few fish starting to come in. It's kind of early. And kind of segueing into our outreach section about kokanee. This year, there won't be any official viewing day. In the past, we've had kind of a specific day to come and spend at the reservoirs to look at the fish. But because of the situation and COVID where we're at, that is not going to happen this year. But we still do invite you to come out. It might be best to come out in the middle of the week and view those spawning kokanee in the rivers. So we're happy about that. And of course, in our region, there'll be kokanee both in Jordanelle and the Strawberry Reservoirs. The state fair is still going to occur this month, but our Division of Wildlife Resources building is gonna look a little bit different than it has in the past. We won't have staff on hand. We'll have some fish in the fishing pond. We won't be fishing in the pond, but we'll have some information as people are able to walk around the pond and through the building to talk about fishing and those types of things. But we won't be at the event this year. But there will be information for DWR there. From our law enforcement section, even with the pandemic in place and everything that's been going on, we've had a lot of discussion about how there's been a lot of people out and about in the mountains all summer long. It continues. It's been a very busy hunting season. Our officers have been extremely busy out there. And like every kind of other year, there's had several good cases this year. Involving trespass issues, untagged animals, and hunters harvesting the wrong animal. So as you're out there, just be careful as you're hunting, that make sure you're following the rules and the laws that are out there. And finally, from our habitat section, you've probably seen we've had quite a few fires throughout the state this year. In our region, we've had 7 fires that we're working on currently to rehab. Working with our partners to put together the rehabilitation plans for those. And then on top of that, they're also getting ready for the fall projects that will be coming up here pretty quickly. So they've been extremely busy, and it'll be a busy fall for them as well. So Brock, with that, unless there's any questions, that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Jason. Does anybody have a question for Jason?
I've got one quick question, Brock. Jason, has the dedicated hunter service been difficult to accomplish with the COVID issue?
That's a great question. Early on, when we kind of knew about the social distancing and challenges we would have there, we've kind of catered the projects to be able to fit it within those restrictions. I think for the most part, we've been able to get everybody through that's wanted to come through the dedicated hunter and do their projects. I will say that we've had quite a few people, a trend anyway, that people that are buying their hours. And that's nothing new. That's been happening in the past. But as far as people having the opportunity to get their projects done, I think we've been pretty successful in getting through those.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jason. Any other questions from the RAC? Seeing none, I think we'll move to our first agenda item. So the first agenda item is item number 5 on the agenda, the 2021-2022 fishing recommendations and fishing contest rule amendments that were presented by Randy Oplinger, the Sportfish coordinator. Does anybody have questions for Randy? Oh, wait, I think we have to summarize the comments first. There was only one comment, right, Jason?
There were actually no comments that I received from Stacy. I don't know if something came through emails. I don't have that information.
Okay. So no comments came through the system. I received a letter from Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife. That letter said that they were in support of the proposal as presented. They asked for one consideration, and that was that on Bear Lake, we have an agreement with Idaho that if you have a Utah license, you can fish on the Idaho side, and if you have an Idaho license, you can fish on the Utah side. On Lake Powell, we have an agreement with Arizona that if you have a Utah license, you can fish in Arizona, and if you have an Arizona license, you can fish in Utah. However, in Flaming Gorge, we have a lopsided agreement. If you have a Wyoming license, you can fish in Utah. But if you have a Utah license, you cannot fish in Wyoming without paying another $40. And they said that they would really like us to put some pressure on to make that reciprocity similar to Bear Lake and to Lake Powell. And that's the only comment I received. Any
Brock,
questions?
Can I,
Yeah, Brock.
Go ahead, Ken.
what's happened is the division's tried to work on this, and from what I gather from the division is it seems like Wyoming thinks that it's the division doing it and the people in Utah are happy. So the idea is to let the people know that the sportsmen are not happy with the fact that they got to go there and pay $40 to fish the Wyoming side when Wyoming doesn't have to pay anything. So that's where it comes from. And if we wrote a letter, signed it as a RAC member or from the central RAC, and each RAC has been asked, send that letter to the director of Wyoming Fish and Game. Let him know that people are upset over the fact that they refuse to work with Utah on that, and we're giving them everything they want, and they're just refusing to cooperate.
Thank you for clarification, Ken.
Brock, this is Dan Potts again. Hey, I want to coattail that. You know, we, as longtime ice fishermen up on the gorge for the Burbot Bash, that really showed through right there, and it was always very it was challenging to deal with all of that for that fishing event, which was to help us control burbot in Flaming Gorge that came from Wyoming. You know, sorry.
Thank you, Danny. Any questions for Randy about the recommended changes? I'm assuming all of you were able to watch the 30-minute presentation and see recommendations dealt with changes in season lengths for spearfishing, changes with the kokanee limit, changes with the panfish limit on a couple of water bodies, and changes with the northern pike limit on a couple of water bodies. I'm sure. Scott, do you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I thought the presentations were really great. I really appreciated the surveys, the public surveys, where they're incorporating that information to let us understand what the public sentiment is. I'm just supportive of all the recommendations there. I thought it was a really good presentation, and I appreciate the way you went about it.
Randy, I have a question for you. How many spear fishermen are there and women? I mean, you're making some pretty large restrictions for the people that do spear fishing. Is it a problem that they're taking too many fish?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know if we have a great handle on the number. I think based off some survey results that we've got, I think it's about 1% of our anglers, at least in some capacity, participate in spearfishing. They might not be regular spearfishers. They might only do it every now and then. But, you know, I tried kind of hitting on this in the presentation. I mean, they are very effective at harvesting a fish. You know, basically, they put a spear in a fish, that fish is going to die. So, I mean, they do have the capacity to remove a lot of fish, and they probably harvest maybe a higher percentage of their fish than other anglers do. So, and there's particularly times of years, a couple of regulations target seasonal closures, particularly for bass, and they're very vulnerable during the spawning season to spearfishing.
That makes sense. I'm personally hesitant at restricting one group of sportsmen or women, but if there's a real reason, I understand it.
I think what's happened is they've just gone, if I understand it right, on Flaming Gorge, or I mean on Fish Lake, and they've just changed it to match the, like the closure of Kokanee closes on the 15th, and they've closed it, made that so it, or 10th, which I can't remember which it is, but anyway, they've done it to match up the other rules and regulations, which we already have. So it just kind of clarifies it across the board. And when a spear fisherman's under there, I don't know how educated they are, but sometimes I wonder if they can tell what they're going after if they just go after a fish.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
During the presentation, I noticed it would talk about the support, the percentage of support among different, residents of the areas. But in some areas, and sometimes it said the support percentage was among groups. So maybe it's the big game person in me, but is the groups referring to like fishing advocate groups, or is the groups referring to the overall percentage of the respondents?
Yeah, I could touch on that. That's a good question. There's really kind of 4 groups of people we looked at. So we looked first off at the statewide support for each regulation change. Then we looked in the Division of Wildlife region. Then we looked at the county, and then we looked finally at the most affected groups. So, I brought up the example if it's a kokanee regulation change, we looked specifically among kokanee anglers for their support. When I talked about groups in the presentation, what I was kind of collectively talking about was those 4 categories that people put together. Oftentimes there was so little variation in the support among those groups, I kind of lumped them together.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Everything else.
So
I don't know if that's possible or not.
You can bring that up next if you want, Ian.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion that's been seconded on the table. Any discussion? Then I'll call for a vote.
Real quick,
Yeah.
Brock, I noticed AJ
Yes.
came into the meeting as well. Did you see that?
I saw AJ and Steve Lund.
Okay, sounds good. And my computer cut out. Who made the motion and who seconded it? Sorry.
Danny Potts made the motion and Ken Strong seconded.
Thank you.
You bet. So the motion is we approve the recommendations as presented. I'll call for a vote. AJ Maurer. AJ, are you there?
Yes.
Thank you. No Ben yet, right? I'm just double checking. Chris Schmitz,
Yes.
Danny Potts,
Aye.
the next one I think is Josh Lenart,
Yes.
Ken Strong,
Yes,
Luke Decker,
Yes.
Mike Christensen,
Yes.
Scott Jensen,
Yes.
Steve Lund.
Yes.
The next item, I don't know how to do this because the agenda was approved. But I'm going to maybe call for a variance from the agenda and let Ken speak maybe for a second. If you want to have something formal from the RAC, Ken.
Well, the idea is this affects all fishermen that fish Flaming Gorge. And if you've got an extra $40 to give Wyoming when you go up there once or twice a year or however many times, that's fine. But we have given in to, Utah has given in to Wyoming on this, that just like they have the other states, and the other states have agreed to it. Wyoming refuses to agree, and I'm not sure, Randy, maybe you can correct me, but I think there's only 1 or 2 individuals that are against it up there in Wyoming. And I was also told in Salt Lake that they think that it's just Salt Lake that's interested in changing it and not the fishermen in Utah. So Sportsmen for Fish and Wildlife has already wrote a letter to Wyoming, and we were hoping that each of the RACs would write a letter to Wyoming as well as the Wildlife Board. Now, I've talked to members of the Wildlife Board and they seem to be in favor of it. I really haven't talked to anybody on the RACs, but other than I send out the letter. But what it would just be asking Wyoming to reconsider, I don't know how to put it, reconsider the going like say Utah and Idaho does.
Having a reciprocity agreement.
Yep. And that's what it would be. Not telling them anything, just asking them to do it, but let them know that there are different groups in Utah that definitely want to see a change. And the divisions put forth a lot of, I mean, they've changed a lot for Wyoming, and Wyoming just doesn't want to give back. And so I think if we put a little pressure on them from fishermen, it will make a difference.
Thank you, Ken. Jason, can we just do that as a RAC?
Yeah, I think you can certainly put together a motion. As far as a letter, I'm not sure. I would think that this body would want to see the letter before maybe it was sent out and they put their name on it. The same with the Wildlife Board. That would be my feeling, and I see some heads nodding there as well. I'll let you decide how you want to do it. If you'd rather see the letter first, and maybe this isn't, maybe that's something that could come to the next RAC meeting. But I'm not sure how comfortable everybody would be without seeing the letter and putting your names on it.
Okay. Does anybody else on the RAC have a feeling here? I'm actually in favor of something like this. I think that a reciprocity agreement would be a good change.
Yeah, Brock, and Potts would also, as I indicated before, we've been waiting for this for forever, right, Ken?
Okay. Other comments?
Yeah, I guess just a question of clarification as well. Ken, I saw your email. Did you forward the SFW letter as well, or was that in a different? I didn't see the SFW letter.
The SFW letter has been already sent, and I'm not a writer, as you can tell with the letter you got, but SFW had somebody that's good with words fill it, and then they sign my name to it and send it up.
Yeah, so it might be helpful for us to see that letter to model our own letter off of. And I guess who would be tasked with writing that? Would that fall to Brock, or what would that look like?
So I would be happy to draft a letter to bring to the next RAC meeting.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea as well.
Does somebody want to move that we do that as a central RAC?
I would like to make the motion that we do that as a central RAC.
Yeah, and Potts will second that because Ken supported my motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor that we draft a letter to send to Wyoming to encourage them to come to a reciprocity agreement. Any discussion?
So I'd be in favor of that. What about RAC members that wouldn't be in favor of it?
That's
How
what
would
I'm
that-
asking. I would
Well,
like to know.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is if the majority want that and it passes, they don't have to sign their name to it.
That's
I'm-
correct.
Okay,
I think
and
that would be right.
yeah, and I'm in favor of it. I think it's a good idea.
So what I'll do, I'll call for a vote in just a second, but I'll have a draft of this letter included about the same time Stacy sends out the RAC packet, so everybody has a chance to review it. before we-
Brock?
Yes,
Brock, this is Steve. I just have a couple questions. I'm in favor of the letter myself, but if our RAC is in favor of it and one of the other RACs isn't, or does this go in the wildlife board? Shouldn't all these letters be pretty consistent? Not necessarily in language, but maybe even in language and verbiage, but also in thought, and be poignant about the reciprocity and the way it ought to be put together and have some structure to it.
so I completely agree with that. I'm not sure, I'm seeking guidance from Jason. I'm not sure what we do here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through this and what would be the best way to go about it as a unified voice. Typically, I think in the past, I think the motions have been to ask the wildlife board to draft a letter and not necessarily have a letter from each individual RAC, but from the wildlife board. And I see Carl on here. Carl, what's your take on that and your thoughts?
That would be my suggestion, that we send one letter from the state and we make it available for all of the RAC members that want to sign it, and the wildlife board, that we just send one letter with a whole list of signatures.
So I like that, Carl. So Ken, are you okay with that friendly amendment? That we make a recommendation to the wildlife board?
I am okay with it.
Okay, so
Aye.
go ahead,
Brock,
whoever.
Brock, this is Carl. I'll commit to, I'm in support of this. I suspect that the board will. I will make the commitment that we extend the ability to add their name to all RAC members that want to support this.
Excellent. I like that. So that's the new motion. The motion on the table is we make a recommendation to the wildlife board to draft a letter to the state of Wyoming seeking a reciprocity agreement for Flaming Gorge.
And who does it fall to now to draft that letter? Is that
Now it'll be the wildlife
the
board.
board?
Yep,
That'll be the board.
yep.
Okay.
And everybody will have the opportunity to sign it. Any more discussion? Okay, I'll call for a vote. AJ Maurer,
Yes, in favor.
Chris Schmitz,
Yes.
Danny Potts,
Yeah.
Josh,
Yes.
Ken Strong,
Yes.
Luke Decker,
Yes.
Mike Christensen,
Yes.
Scott Jensen,
Yes.
Steve Lund.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is not an action item. It's an informational item. It's the Angler Opportunity Assessment Update by Craig Walker. I was gonna see if there were any questions or discussion questions for Craig or discussion on that Opportunity Assessment Update.
I have a couple.
Okay.
First off, it was a great presentation, Craig. I appreciated it. You talked about how we plant more trout than other species. What's the cost benefit analysis on raising trout versus raising warm water species or other species?
Well, I'd say from a cost benefit analysis right now, we would be more efficient from a rearing of trout standpoint, just because we have the infrastructure and the history on our side with regard to raising salmonids and salmon and trout. With regard to warm and cool water fishes, it's kind of a new ball game for us. The expertise is something that we're learning. We're getting more efficient and effective with raising species like tiger muskie, like wiper. But right now, we're reliant oftentimes on buying those fish from brokers and private growers, and that is fairly expensive relative to the trout that we raise, for sure.
Okay. So to switch over to that, to go away from, to bring it back to that percentage of demand, it would be probably more expensive to do that under the current structure. Is that kind of?
I think it forces us to play the long game and start to develop the infrastructure, as I mentioned in the presentation, looking at developing new hatcheries for the propagation of warm and cool water species. That's going to put warm and cool water fishes on an equal footing with trout as far as the cost per pound to raise.
Okay.
It's an investment, and it's going to be a multi-year effort to get us caught up, for sure.
Perfect, thanks. And then the other question I have, I talked to you a little bit about this previously, was Utah only sells a 3-day license for $16. I think it would be very advantageous, and I know that it's on the legislative level probably to do something different, but my opinion is it would be advantageous to have like a 1-day cheaper license. Like if a youth group wants to go out and we want to expose kids who don't get to go in the outdoors to go do something like that, the cost can be prohibitive. And I would just encourage the division to look into a 1-day license, even if it was just for youth. But, you would be able to gather information on your clients, on your future prospective clients, and have that data. And you'd also be able to expose more people to a resource and a pastime, even though your data shows that we're going to, largely increase that pressure. But I think that would be a worthwhile endeavor there. So that's.
No, Mike,
I agree.
I thank you for bringing that to the RAC's attention during the meeting this time, because I need to tie a string on my finger when we do start looking at fee structures and how we actually sell licenses in the state. That has to be a primary concern for us. It's a great idea. It gives folks the flexibility, like you said, allows us to tap into maybe a segment of the angling population in the form of youth anglers that we aren't currently able to tap into from an information standpoint, for sure.
Well,
I know a few years ago.
Once again, hey, as a guide, fishing guide for a number of years, my customers all were only fishing 1 day, whether they were in state or from out of state.
Yet another group that would be served by that type of license, for sure.
I know we used to have a 1-day license a few years ago, and why we did away with it, I'm not sure. Craig, on these warm water species that we're planting, are most of those fertile, or are they triploids?
Sorry, I was just writing myself a note, so I remembered to bring it up in a more formal setting. It's about 50-50 right now. It depends on the purpose of why we're stocking these warm and cool water species. We've got crappie, we've got largemouth, we've got bluegill that we're moving in that we want to establish, yellow perch, we want to establish reproducing populations where safe. We've got wiper, we've got tiger muskie that we want to establish populations and be able to manipulate populations so that we can adjust them appropriately and get a predator-prey balance going. Therefore, we want to use them because they're sterile. But it's about a 50-50 split right now between the fish we use.
Well, I think right now you guys are headed in the right direction, and I think as I've talked to you before, you guys seem to be interested in keeping everything on a good balance, and I'm sure that a lot of these, like the crappie and perch and bluegill, probably reproduce pretty fast, so that'll be helpful as both as for predators and for fishermen.
Yeah, I think throughout that presentation and all the discussions we've had over the past 2 years, specifically with regard to informational items, but also in Randy's regulation presentation, we're really trying to tailor our efforts, our management efforts, to meet the needs of what we now recognize is a diverse angling public, whereas maybe historically 20, 30 years ago, we kind of treated everybody as a one size fits all, and that just can't be the case anymore. So.
You're muted, Brock.
Thanks, Ken. Happens to the worst of us. Any other comments for Craig? This was informational only, but does anybody have any action they want to make relative to the state fisheries? Hearing none, we'll go. Do you have something, Ken?
Yeah, I just want to say if ever the chance arrives to see what they've done at Springville Fish Hatchery, it's quite a setup, and I don't know, Craig, if they allow some of us in there or not. I know I've been in where they raise all the walleye and see all the big tubs and see how they're doing things, but they're really high tech, and it's made a big change in fishing on the west side of the road.
Outside of COVID times, I think we'd be more than happy to allow the public to come in and take a look, as long as they were disinfecting as they came in. Beyond that, like you mentioned, as part of the Blue Ribbon Fisheries Advisory Council, we definitely have taken our special interest groups. RACs would be another one. We're able to bring them in as a group and showcase how we're putting their licensed dollars to work in that setting. And it is really impressive. That, Lee K, all of our hatcheries are really exemplary. We're doing an amazing job right now on the culture front, for sure.
I would love to have a tour after COVID, hopefully after COVID.
Seconded.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a Middle Provo River update by Jackie Watson, the Blue Ribbon Fisheries biologist. I thought she did a great job. Anybody have questions or comments for Jackie?
Again, I've got a couple. Sorry to make the meeting go long.
No, you're good, Mike. I love it. Let's hear it.
When you talk about pounds per mile, does that equate to size of fish per mile, or just the number of fish per mile, or how does that work?
So what we presented for the Provo River, it's really just the number of fish, well, pounds per mile. And the reason behind that is, the reason we presented that metric is to compare to Wyoming. Wyoming isn't specific about the average weight of any of their fish. It's just 600 pounds per mile. So that was all we had to compare to. In the Middle Provo, our more recent data, fish are just a little bit over a pound a piece, from the most recent on the Middle Provo.
Oh, that's great.
And then Mike, I'll answer that too. In fisheries ecology, generally they use biomass, not number, like they do in wildlife ecology.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking, and I like how you included the trophy sizes, because one of the things that we heard from anglers was the fish were stunted, and so that's why I asked that question about the pounds. But then I like how you came back and showed the percentage of larger trout. The other thing I have is, do the trout do they compete and affect the whitefish numbers? Because am I wrong that the whitefish are native, correct?
The whitefish are native. I'm sure there is some competition between the two species, but it's not strong competition. We see populations of whitefish doing very well right alongside of trout.
Okay. I really appreciated the presentation and how you came across with it. So I thought it was very informative.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jackie or comments? Thank you, Jackie. We really appreciate it. I'll move on to the next agenda item. Our final agenda item is number 8, the R657-62 rule amendment regarding deployed military that Lindy Varney presented. I'll call for questions from the RAC. Oh, yeah, there were no comments.
I think it was a great presentation, and I think they're headed in the right way. Those people that are over there fighting for our rights to hunt and fish ought to have a little bit of a plus. I enjoyed it, and I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Ken. Other comments or questions? Mike?
I'd make a motion that we approve as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to approve as presented made by Mike.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Ken. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. AJ Maurer,
Yes.
Chris Schmitz,
Yes.
Danny Potts,
Yeah.
Josh Lenart,
Yes.
Ken Strong,
Yes.
Luke Decker,
Yes.
Mike Christensen,
Yes.
Scott Jensen,
Yes.
Steve Lund.
Yes.
Did anybody join the meeting that I didn't call? Ben, Eric, Jake. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last thing I had on the agenda. Is there anything anybody wants to bring up? Hearing nothing, I move to adjourn.
Seconded.
I'll second that.
I'll go by a raise of hands. I can see 5 of you. That's more than there you go. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.